What's up? Welcome back to another episode of 5 Favorites. I am here with a very special guest today. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Brandon Sanderson?
It's Brando Sando, actually.
Brando Sando.
Yeah, see,
okay.
the N is silent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so is the sun, apparently.
Fantastic. Jokes aside, I'll let you finish introing this video.
No, you're doing a good job, Ren. So this is Ren from Corridor. You probably have seen their videos and not necessarily identified because they get so viral. Like you said,
reposted and everything. Yeah.
The most famous one you said is the Bosstown Dynamics, which I love. These are the ones where, if you know Boston Dynamics, they make these cool robots that are like, they're
pretty sweet.
They're pretty sweet, but they're always kicking them.
Yeah, it's like you always feel bad for these robots.
Yeah. They're showing how stable they are by kicking the robot, and then I actually got by you on this one because it was posted just on Reddit. Even though I subscribed to your channel, I saw it on Reddit first.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm like, they're like, it's possible. And I just watched it until the robots
things start going a little weird. And you're like, wait a minute.
It's just a little bit weird at first, a little bit, and then the robots fight back and stuff like that.
And somehow no one notices that it says Bosstown and not Boston.
Yeah. No, that's
right there in front.
Yep. But I have really loved Corridor's work for years.
Thank you.
I found you first. Apparently, it was one of your very first videos, the stop motion kind of karate video.
Yeah, that was way back in the day.
Love that. Though my favorite video of yours to this day is I like the ones with more narrative elements, and so my favorite video to the day is the lightsaber training
to the death. Yes.
Thing, which maybe we will link that. We don't want to give spoilers. It's actually got it's a really great little short film. A lot of what you do is comedic and hilarious, right? You recently did if Steven Seagal were in John Wick.
Yeah.
And I was just laughing and laughing. But this one is very serious. It's an actual just short story, science fiction short story, like you might as a short film that you might read it. It was just really well done. And
yeah, I mean, I got to give shout out to Nico on that one. I think he wrote it, but he definitely directed it and all that. It was a very interesting film. In fact, I think not to spoil it too much, we're working on expanding that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do all kinds of cool things, really cool things with AI lately, and
a lot of that for sure.
And a lot of deep fake type stuff, kind of proving, like what you were telling me the other night, that putting these tools in the hands of really skilled filmmakers can create things that couldn't be created otherwise.
Absolutely. I'm a really big fan of that. You had in one of your, it was the epilogues of one of the Stormlight books where Whit is talking about what is something that most people value most, and it was novelty. And that kind of changed my life. I realized that is what I love most, and so that has kind of shaped everything that I do. Is I'm trying to find like what is the most novel approach to something. And so I think you hit it on the head with that.
Well, you probably, if you're watching this, don't need my recommendation, but you definitely should subscribe to Corridor. They are one of the best YouTube channels on the platform, and
thank you.
We are really happy to have you here.
I am stoked to be here.
We're going to talk superpowers.
We are indeed, and I want to just start off by saying that it's a little intimidating to discuss superpowers with someone who has created so many different superpowers and superpower systems.
Yeah, the thing about it is, it's weird because like every time I create one, I'm like, oh, this is so original. And then I find out that Marvel did it in 1950. Marvel wasn't around. In 1962 or whatever like that, right? And I'm like, oh, there's great. You came up with this cool thing, and no, there's this guy that's been doing that in the comics, and he's an underground fan favorite, and good job just kind of doing that. But
it's like the law of large numbers. At some point, there's some superpower that they've shown at some point in the huge breadth of volumes out there.
But that's actually good, because I always tell writers, like, you can't come up with something probably original, but you yourself are original. So your take on it will be interesting.
Yeah.
If you train yourself in the right tools, you don't have to do something completely new. You can do it in a new way, in your way, and it will still be great. So I will start with my number 5 and then yours. That way we end with your number 1. All right. So my number 5, and I'm gonna give you some little ground rules I made for myself on this.
Okay.
You saw me we put these up on a whiteboard, and I was listing numbers underneath mine. So
I thought you were just listing area codes by random.
So they superpowers are kind of it's a very broad topic, and so I'm like, well, what does he mean by favorite superpower? Is it a favorite superpower to have, to read about, or to write about? And so I gave each of mine a score.
I didn't even think about it that way. I was just thinking to have.
Yeah, about whether I would want to have it. 1 to 5.
Okay.
If I would want to have it. 1 to 5, how interesting has it been generally to read about? And the last one, how interesting would it be for me to write about?
I love this.
So my number 5 is the Gambit power. The charge things with energy and do interesting stuff with it.
Gambit, like from the X-Men?
X-Men Gambit power.
Cards?
Yeah, the cards and the things like that. Gambit as a package is a fantastic superhero because he's interesting, he's different, his power is different. I like it when people do this. He's one of this evolution of superheroes where it starts out at kind of the Superman where you just basically have all of them and whatever power you need at the moment. Moving
just
into
go to the list, this one.
Yeah, I mean, have you read any Silver Age Superman?
No, but it's been recommended to me.
Oh man, Silver Age Superman is the best because every writer's just like, Superman should be able to do this, and they just like, there's a comic, I kid you not, where Superman gains the superpower to shoot a small Superman out of his hands that goes and does the superhero stuff for him.
But like at a small scale?
A small scale Superman comes out of his hand. And then Superman gets jealous of small Superman because small Superman is doing all the Superman stuff that Superman wants to do. But then small Superman that comes out of Superman's hand sacrifices himself for big Superman, and big Superman learns to have not been jealous of small Superman for his heroism.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's wild. I might have to check that out.
Yeah, it is so wild. But I like when we got past kind of the Silver Age where you kind of have this, we're going to create the whole package. What is this character's power set? What can they do with it? How is it limited? We're not going to come up with new powers every week. We're going to build a character. So Gambit's a very good character for that reason.
Can you describe specifically how this power like manifests? You're saying like injecting energy into something.
Making matter unstable. I like the Gambit power because I like it as a improvised weapons thing. It's the Jackie Chan. It's the Jackie Chan of the superhero world. He gets to just do all kinds of goofy stuff. But I gave him a 1 for powers that I would like to have on this list.
Okay.
Because I do not think I would find a lot of uses for supercharging things and making them explode.
1 being like lowest?
Okay. I do not need to blow things up very often.
Yeah.
And, I mean, maybe like Shazam in the movie, I could charge people's phones. But
that would be very handy.
He blows up a few of those, so
also risky.
It's not really hard to get your phone charged. So I gave it a 1. But for how it's used, I gave between a 2 and a 3, depending on the writer
and how creative you can get
and how creative they were. Like a lot of my Gambit experience was from the old X-Men cartoon, and the old X-Men cartoon gets a 2. They just Gambit just basically had grenades, right? Which is if you can replace your superpower by a belt of grenades, then it's not actually a really interesting superpower.
It's very superficial, yeah.
But I gave it for myself like a 4 to a 5. I could come up with all kinds of cool things to do with Gambit. Maybe more like a 3 to a 4. It is a pretty limited power, but I'm like, this would be the type of power that'd be really fun to play with, or medium fun. How about that? Medium fun to play with.
Like secret book number 5?
No, there's none of these. But it's just like, I'm like, there's some things you could do with this that would make it an interesting power to write.
What's an example?
So because like you can charge it up, can you make things glow brightly? Can you turn that into a wizard staff so that you can light a room, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Can you?
Be a lot of energy.
Right.
A lot of heat.
Does it give off heat? Does it not when he holds them? How long does it take for them to explode? If they just give off heat, then that adds to the power. You can do all kinds of cool things with. Can he? how targeted can he get? Can he blow up really small things so that he could hold up a piece of paper and make an image appear of little explosions or not?
Like a dot printer type thing, just
can
like
he
printing
be
a
a dot
at a
matrix
time?
printer? Like, what can you do? Like, how much can you push this power, and what is outside the realm of what he could do? And so my score there depends on how far you can push that power.
Okay, I like that. I hadn't considered the idea of just putting energy into something and letting that being able to do things with that.
I mean, that's what
everything comes
Stormlight
down to
Archive
energy.
is, right? Is
fair, yeah.
You leave out these gemstones in the storm, and you've got a little battery, and you can use it to do stuff with. Is Gambit that? Can he make it so things don't explode? Because the explosion is the problem. It's handy.
That is the problem.
But it makes the power much less versatile. So.
Yeah, I don't want to use this power around kids.
No, not good for birthday parties. Yeah.
So my fifth favorite superpower is, well, first off, I want to clarify that the powers that I chose for this list were like
what you want to have.
Like, what I want to have. I'm not a writer, so I didn't even think about that as a concept. But and I also didn't think about powers that I would like to read about, because if that was the case, I'm just going to put all of your books on the list. But I think my fifth favorite superpower is the idea of precognition, or being able to see into the future.
Right.
And I know I was trying to not choose Cosmere-based powers, but this is probably the closest one to ATM, for instance.
Right. Okay. So you're like, would you want to be able to see, or is it a spidey sense, or are we talking like how far in the future would you want to be able to see? Do you want to go like full Minority Report? You can see a murder before it happens and then stop it, or is it just like, I need to know so I can get out of the way of a bus? Or things.
I was kind of thinking all the above, which inherently makes it less interesting. But again, I'm coming from the standpoint of what would I like to have? I would like to be able to know what the lottery tickets are going to be. I would like to know whether or not I'm about to get hit by a car or a bullet, to be able to get out of the way.
Pandora's box, not really a consideration for you here?
I mean, that was the other thing, is that like, what are the limitations here?
Yeah,
and
like if you know how everyone's going to die and you can't do anything about it, that's a horror story.
That is a horror story.
People have written that story before.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, but Necroscope is a little bit like that with Brian Lumley, which is a good book, by the way.
I mean, I guess more towards the spidey sense element of things. Like, I'd like to know a few seconds into the future, so I know if like something is about to happen, I should act immediately.
Right. I mean, that is pretty handy.
But something with a little bit more specificity than just spidey sense of like,
All right. You want to know. You want like a little voice to say to you, in 15 seconds, that person's going to get hit by a bus. Make sure they don't cross the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah. So I can like protect the people around me. Yeah. Maybe ideally there's enough of like protect my own future.
Don't get on that plane. In fact, stop that plane from taking off if you can.
Oh boy.
That would actually be, I would give this a pretty high score and want to write about.
Okay.
If it is, you don't know why or what. If you're a superhero and it's like, you have a voice that says, don't let that plane take off. And you have to stop the plane from taking off, but no one believes you have the power.
And you can't explain it.
You can't explain it. You don't actually know what's going to happen.
You just have to trust yourself.
You just have to trust yourself
that
this is important. And then you're going to be doubting yourself. A lot of internal conflict, because it's happened historically. You've seen bad things happen, but you don't know if, am I actually schizophrenic? What's going on? And then you put yourself in these huge predicaments where it's like, the only way I can stop this plane is to do a bomb threat on it. And then you do the bomb threat on it. It stops the plane. But then you don't know. You're in prison, and you don't know what would have happened or things like that. And if there was going to be the plane was going to be destroyed by someone, you don't know if the bad guys who are going to do that are just going to pick another plane.
Oh, yeah.
And like that could get a 5 out of 5 as a writing concept on that power.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, you wrote about ATM being able to see a few seconds into the future. But another thing about this is that you were very clear that, at least with the use of ATM, that along with that ability was the ability to comprehend all of the potential options going forward. And that's something that I don't think is, talked about enough. And I guess we'll talk about that a little bit further with some of these future
I agree. Sometimes you get powers
choices.
And you're like, I mean, this happened in Man of Steel, which I liked some things about. But he gets superpowers, and then he suddenly is a great soldier, can fight trained soldiers, and they get the superpowers immediately, and then they can immediately use them. Anyway, some of these things, it's kind of hard to justify, but You can just say the powers grant the ability to use them.
Right, yeah.
My number 4 is healing factor, regeneration. And I actually put this one on the list because I'm like, if I'm going to pick a power for myself, this is probably the one I would pick. It might be smarter to pick some more powerful powers, but I've read enough stories to know that a lot of those really powerful powers don't go so well for people, right? Like, and I'd be worried about, doing things like breaking causality and whatnot. If I just have healing factor, so that I know that I'm not gonna, that I can finish the Cosmere. It's like, here's your superpowers.
I'm sure everyone would want this.
You're guaranteed to reach 90 and you'll be healthy and hale the whole way. And then you'll one day, keel over. That's or, even better, you get the Wolverine thing. You got 200 or 300 years in there.
Because that's the other thing is that like the idea of invulnerability or living forever, immortality, isn't that basically just the same thing as regeneration?
Depends
healing?
on how much you want to go with it. Like, I've read too many stories about how terrible immortality is, which I'm not sure it would be that terrible. But
I agree. I've thought about it too. I'm like, oh yeah, everyone I've ever loved would die, but I think I could get over that.
Everyone I've ever loved is going to die anyway.
Sorry.
Right? And you're gonna have to learn to get over anyway. I don't know that it's as awful as but I'm writing about people who are 10,000 years old regularly in my books, and they
some of them are a little crazy though.
Some of them are a little crazy. That's Cosmere Magic Dynamics. Hoyd managed to get around it. You can do it, but you just gotta know what you're doing. But anyway, I gave Regeneration a 5 for have. I gave it a 2 for read about. The main reason for this is regeneration is not actually that interesting a power in most cases.
Because it's just a cop out, right?
It's
like,
utilitarian.
Cool.
Like, I actually give it to most, the Knights Radiant basically have this, right? Because it's really functional to help, like, in the real world, a pretty minimal injury can keep a soldier off the battlefield like for months and months and months and months. You see how it happens with sports people. You pull the wrong tendon and you're like, I'm out for the season, right? And that's realism. If you don't have some way to deal with that, you either deal with the realism, which can be interesting, can totally be interesting, but you also just cannot have your characters regularly be in dangerous situations if you don't have some form of regeneration in your fantasy story. And both are valid. You can totally.
But they also still have their limitations, at least in your works, where it's like, you can still die.
You can still die. But that's why I give it a 2. I gave it a 3 for me to write about because I know how to give some limitations to make it a little more interesting.
Yeah.
But it's still not the most interesting power to write about. It's more like this is the glue that sometimes holds together an epic fantasy type story or superpowered type story.
Yeah. It's on my list too, but
But
I'll get into why it's a little higher on my list.
Well, you're looking strictly at wanting to have it. If it were wanting to have, this would either be number 1 or number 2 for me.
Fair. Okay. I mean, yeah. So for my number 4, I went with time travel, essentially, which, of course, like you're talking about causality, a whole lot of things, and so it's like we can get really specific with how this works. Is like, I mean. The reason why I'm here, the frugal wizard. You decided to get around time travel entirely by just being like, it's a different dimension that
it's not time
didn't
travel.
Evolve the same way, which I found very fascinating. But a friend of mine and I, we came up with an idea for a series that we might get around to doing at some point, like a comics type series. We're gonna something along the lines that we like the name History Hooligans, where basically we want to go back in time and see like what are the most hipster moments in time that no one knows about but are super cool, and just
That's
like
a great
and
concept.
go there and like check it out. Like, this is a cool thing.
Yeah.
And that's about where the end of that development has gone. There's some ideas there, but I would love to be able to just go back in time and witness various parts in history and be able to not have the risk of screwing up my own future, butterfly effect type stuff.
It's like, everyone talks about the invention of fire. Here's the invention of shoes. Invention of shoes was a really great moment. Tharg, who came up with the shoes, is like, and everyone's like, oh, yeah. So
it's like, okay, nice, good idea. Billions, hundreds of billions of people, about 100 billion people. I don't know how many people have existed ever. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Dan had a great idea once where he and I were riffing on dumb stories that we someday want to tell. We thought about if you were going to go get like people from history and build like a super team, like a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen type thing,
right.
but you're going to pick the unusual options. He's like, we get the guy who invented fire, maybe girl. We get the person who invented fire, the greatest inventor of all time, right? And it's like your superhero team has a Neanderthal or something over there who's like, yeah, invented fire. You may know my work, you know.
You know my work.
Yeah, fire
Thermal
and
energy,
the wheel, you know, the 5 basic tools. Those were me. Yeah. So.
Do you think those inventions were accidents or deliberate?
Boy, I think that fire has to have been deliberate because we saw fire. We're like, that's really handy. That's really useful, right? But we can't make it. But we can get it after lightning strikes and have it. Well, how do we make it? They've got to have tried to make it to replicate that, right? The wheel might have been an accident. Like maybe somebody put like something square on and it eventually became a wheel. Like, wow, that's way easier. It knocked off all those corners. And
my theory on how wheels got invented is someone saw like a tree that got knocked over, like roll down a hill, and they're like, what if we just cut the end of it off and do the same thing?
See, it's probably something more like that. It's probably that because a lot of early motion moving large objects was put a whole bunch of trees next to each other, and you roll the block on that, right?
Right. Isn't that more or less how the prevailing theory on how the pyramids were made?
That is one of the theories.
Or just like wet sand, I
think? They go back and forth between those two things. But we do know that was used as a method for moving large objects in the past. It's like, it seems like you got to invent the axle. It's the wheel.
That's the more
the
important
thing.
invention.
It's the axle.
It's the axle.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, for sure.
But you can see that rolling and be like, okay, maybe we can. But who knows? Have you ever seen one of the best comics on the internet? One sheet is caveman science fiction.
No, I haven't.
Look up caveman science fiction.
Okay.
It's by the person. He does that really interesting, kind of weird philosophical science fiction thing. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Is his main comic.
Okay.
Adam will find the name of it for us. But caveman science fiction, it's just like 4 panels, like done 4 or 5 times. And
Quick.
It's science fiction as told by caveman. So, for instance,
I like this premise.
It's a caveman. In the first one, it's drawn really funnily. He's like, he says, I am hygiene. I am poop in hole, not wherever I am. And another caveman's like, you are play gods. Right?
All right,
and then he poops in a hole, and then they've made like a pretend like thing so the poop falls on his head, but it's a special effect. The cavemen are making science fiction, right? Right. Science fiction is science will destroy you. So it's like the dangers of pooping in a hole, because that's science fiction. Imagine if people pooped in holes. Well, the poop would fall on their heads out of the hole because who knows what'll happen. Dresden Kodak. It's the artist of the Dresden Kodak. Anyway, caveman science fiction. I love. It's one of my favorites.
I will check this one out for sure.
And you have to get people watch it and they're like, but you wouldn't poop in a hole, it wouldn't fall on your head. And you're like, no. This is caveman writing science fiction. Science fiction that they are imagining the science, the far off science of pooping in holes, and what that would be.
The wildest imaginations when nothing has imagined it up until that point.
Yes. All right. Time travel is dangerous. Time travel is actually, for writing about, it's like a 1 for me. Just because maybe it's like a 2 because I do time travel adjacent things. I like to do a lot of visions of the past or things like that.
Right.
But breaking causality, it's so dangerous in fiction. And I find that you can do it once and then it ruins the story forever. Like, I love Endgame.
I was about to say.
Endgame is kind of the end of the MCU for me.
Yeah, it was like they pulled the trick and it was like they did it. It's kind of hard to do that again and have it be just as engaging.
Yep. And so time travel, super dangerous. I still haven't done a time travel story. I'm unlikely to do a straight time travel story.
Straight time travel, fair.
Yeah. Like Frugal Wizard is my attempt to have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Not going to break causality. Doesn't, you can't go, because you can go to another time period, but you can't fix anything that you break there. because you are in an alternate dimension that is not actually time traveling. You're just going to a version of our world where technology progressed differently. It's actually the same year. It's just, and that means that you gets rid of the big limitation is that if you break the reader's ability to suspend disbelief, because you can just always fix stuff. It works really well in Bill and Ted because it's a joke.
Right, sure.
But you would actually legit want to have this? I've thought about this.
Like, I don't know. I don't know how much of this is useful versus just kind of like a trinket type of ability. Would I do it for fun, or would I try to actually like would I go back in time and set up some sort of gamble on some games that I know the outcome of, and then set up a trust fund that I can go back to present time and then use that, but then all the causality stuff.
Right.
There's a reason why I'm not a writer.
I would have to have very strict understanding of what the consequences would be before I would activate any sort of time travel power. If I could know
totally fair.
that there's that I can just go back and witness certain events, right? And it will not break anything, and I can't change anything, then I would totally be on board for having that power. It would be really cool to go back and witness, historical events and things like that.
Right, yeah.
I'm going to go actually be in the room when they sign, Declaration of Independence. That would be cool, right?
Yeah,
I'm going to go back to 33 AD and go find the Sermon on the Mount and just I'm going to go learn Aramaic so I can hear it straight from the mouth and things like that. So, yeah.
So I feel like that ability is just, I don't know, maybe a little bit of that wish fulfillment aspect of just that'd be nice.
Dangerous. You're
Dangerous
You're
indeed.
living on the edge, Ren. Very dangerous.
That's how I live.
All right, number 3 for me is flying. And Adam knows that I love the idea of flying. He's like, I thought that would be number 1 for you. I would love to be able to fly. But anytime I'm asked, what superpower do you want? I'd say I would love to be able to fly. But then I think of, man, there's so many smarter things to do, right? What are my limitations? Can I wish, to have the power to snap my fingers and every person in the world is fed? Right? I would not be able to...
Look at you bringing morality into this.
I wouldn't be able to pick flying if that's
if that's on the table.
If that's on the table. And there's some later powers on here that I'm like, and the other thing about flying is, while I would really love to have it, it's got a high. I gave it a 5. If someone said, would you like to be able to fly? Then I would say, yes, I would love to be able to fly. Tell me what the limitations and costs are, but yes, I would love to be able to fly. Thing about it is, it's not very interesting to write about. Flying is not very interesting to write about because it just it's.
How do you make it interesting?
How do you make it interesting? You make it not flying.
Good point.
Right?
Windrunners don't fly; they fall.
Windrunners don't fly; they fall. So skydiving is interesting. Skydiving in any direction, more interesting than flying. I actually think allomancy is just even a little more crunchy for a writer. You can do more things with it than windrunning. But both of them are my attempts to say, well, let's give something that's like flying that gives us the advantages of being able to have this this fantastical adventure in the sky where you get this sense of wonder, but let's make it interesting to write about. Let's make it so that there's skill involved. I don't get skill involved when Superman flies. He doesn't.
He goes this way, then that way.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're falling, you have to actually glide and fly yourself.
And so usually I gave it actually a pretty low score also for people writing about it. I think I gave it a 2. No, I gave it a 3. It depends on the writer, but it's one of these ones that's it works. I'm totally fine reading a story. It's not like I'm going to, but I don't enjoy writing about it as much until I change it into not flying, and then it gets really interesting.
Gotcha, yeah.
Then it becomes one of my favorite things to write about.
So that's why no one in the Cosmere has the pure just flying ability.
Just pure flying ability is boring. So
totally fair. So my 3rd favorite superpower is your 4th favorite. It's healing, regeneration. And that is something that I specifically would love to have because I get injured a lot. I literally just had surgery a week ago to repair my collarbone, and it's now I have metal in my body that I could have just gotten away with not having that. And the idea of just never having to wear safety gear ever again. Not that I hate safety gear. Helmets are cool, but you wouldn't have to worry about it.
I mean, being able to do the Captain America thing where you're jumping out of the plane without a parachute.
Yeah.
You're There's my house. See you guys. There goes Wren. All right. Those clothes are ruined, but I guess he'll get home faster.
Yeah, so I feel like there's obviously the Wolverine aspect of it, where it's just like you can regrow your body really quickly, but and there's also the not aging aspect of it. But do you then like sort of de-age back to like the most primal point of your biology? I feel like it can get pretty complicated. But you know, I'm also remember. Do you ever see the show Heroes?
Yep.
Way back, like Save the Cheerleader, Save the World. She had a similar ability.
Power, and they. I like Heroes. Season 1 of Heroes, really solid.
Love season 1.
Really solid storytelling, really fantastic arc. They went a little far on the let's see how badly we can mutilate her, and it's okay because she'll just heal. Like one episode, she opens up splayed on a table during an autopsy.
That's right.
One episode, they actually do the hand in the garbage disposal, and I'm like, come on, guys.
It's like you still feel pain.
Yeah.
It's not like this is pleasant.
Maybe she must not, because she's not screaming when these things happen. So it must. But
I can relate to that, sister. I feel like I've developed a very high pain tolerance because I get injured all the time. And
what are you doing that you get injured all the time?
One-wheel racing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like competitive one-wheel racing.
Okay.
But ironically, most of the times I've gotten injured on a one-wheel were from me not paying full attention to the moment. You know, it's like one of my first injuries was I was just like, I'm coming up to a T-junction. I was like, should I turn left or right? So I pull out my phone for Google Maps, and I didn't see a pothole in the road. And it was like instantly thrown to the ground. That sucked. But ironically, my most recent break, this one right here, I was actually like fully focused. I had all my safety gear on. The prevailing theory right now is that was the chin part of my full face helmet actually contributed to snapping the collarbone. It's similar to like, you can actually stand on a Coke can. It's like a regular 12-ounce can. You can stand on it. It'll support your weight. But the moment you tap the side of it, collapses. Right. And so it's a similar thing like that. I think there was enough buckling force that it could have broken it, but maybe there wasn't quite enough, but the chin part hitting that was enough to like move it. Apparently, this is a common injury in mountain biking. I didn't know this. And I have another friend who recently broke his collarbone about a month or so ago doing the exact same thing.
And this is why I don't trust the outdoors. This is why we sit in our room and write secret projects instead of venturing into that place where mountain bikes attack you and potholes appear out of nowhere.
Meanwhile, I'm just like, I can't wait to get healed so I can get right back to it.
All right, my number 2 is Magneto powers.
Straight up Magneto.
Kind of straight Magneto. I threw Allomancy into this, the pushing and pulling. Manipulation of metal.
Yeah. Because I was going to say is like, what I've never really fully understood about Magneto's powers is it just the ferrous metals, like the ones that actually react to magnet? Because like aluminum, titanium, all these other, most metals don't react to magnetism.
Yeah, Magneto, one of the things is he is the best supervillain because of, in my opinion, because of his backstory. His characterization, the Professor X Magneto dynamic is really strong.
I love it.
They've done some really cool things in the comics. You know, Magneto being good is always good for a short run of I need to take over for Professor X and be the good guy that I always could have been. Like I eat that stuff up, right? He's a great character. We live in a world dominated by metal. Metal is everywhere. And that wasn't always the case, right?
Fair, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the history of humankind. And metal's always played an interesting role in our history, or not always, but during the, at least starting in antiquity.
Bronze Age?
Yeah, Bronze Age sort of stuff, but it's all over, and so being able to play with it is actually really fun. I didn't give myself a high to have this. Like, this is a 2 for me. I could do things with it, but it's not, like, I'm not needing that every day in my real life. Like, if you came to me and said, here's a list of powers, and one of them was to speak any language, which is like...
Ooh, that'd be cool.
A superpower that in the comics some characters have, and it's usually pretty not very useful, right? It's like, all right, we'll bring around the interpreter. Google can do his job, but he's there. But in real life, that would be amazing. Being able to, like, it particularly came with the ability to kind of relate and understand the language constructions and how that relates to the culture and how the culture thinks about things and whatnot. Just being able to understand cultures and languages and be able to speak. That would be like one of the dream abilities.
So, but you're talking more fundamental than just like having a translation spit back to you, because I feel like we're really close to being able to just talk in real time with someone without sharing the language.
No, just being able to, like, if I could go to a book signing in Germany and just interact with the fans in German, right? That would just be...
Just bring your connection coin.
Yeah, there you go. That would be delightful. But Matt, it's kind of like the difference between real life and comic books. In comic books, you want Magneto's powers because people are attacking you all the time. You gotta be able to make shields out of metal that you rip out of the beams that are forming the concrete or holding the concrete together in the wall.
Cool.
But in real life, I just wouldn't be doing that very much. I gave myself
because you'd be liable for that damage.
A 5 to read about and a 5 to write about, though. Because this is one of the things that at least I've seen both in the film and the comics, the authors do a really good job of making Magneto's powers interesting and having interesting limitations. He plays with them in cool ways. They sometimes go a bit far into what are the limits of this? Oh, too much iron in the blood, you say, and things like that. But at the same time, it's just always really cool, and it's really fun to write about. Allomancy, the pushing and pulling aspect of it just has been a blast. So I gave it a 5.
I mean, I feel that is one of my favorite abilities out of Allomancy is that, I mean, I know I actually put ATM on my list, so maybe I just contradicted myself, but yeah, no, pushing and pulling, because it's always going directly from the center of you, and you have to like be able to account for, inertia.
Yep. I don't know if you know the story. Allomancy, that part of Allomancy came from when I was watching episode 1.
Episode 1 of
Star Wars.
Oh, like the episode 1.
Episode 1. When I was watching episode 1, there is a point where Darth Maul points at something on the ground and goes like that. And the thing moves, laterally to him and hits the wall and opens the door. And I'm like, cool visual. How does the Jedi telekinesis work? Because I have always seen it's going to pull this thing to me, and suddenly he's pointing, going like that, and then in later episodes, Yoda's like, this, and Yoda raised a ship, so I guess you always could, but I'm like, how does this work with leverage? Is there any sort of, like, what are the vector physics on this? How does this even go? And I'm like, well, what if you could only do right toward you or away from you, kind of like pulling the lightsaber to you? It gets really interesting because you have to position yourself in relation to everything. It makes for good blocking and storytelling and writing. The way they do it for the Jedi actually works very well on the screen. Writing books and being on the screen is very different because in the books, it's like your character, you need to be giving them goals and objectives. And in the screen, you're just watching them fulfill those goals and objectives. So in the book, it's like, I need to get to this position so I can push on this and knock them, or I need to get him in this position so I can do this. It makes the fight scene way more engaging to read. Visually, that Darth Maul scene is fine, but it also kind of makes my brain go, wait, like, what can you do, like, with this, and what can't you do? And then you go down the rabbit hole of the Star Wars pretend physics, where it is a universe where there's sound in space and gravity in space, so really don't think about it too hard.
Fair play. So my number 2 superpower is telekinesis.
Okay, same sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of building upon that, but I think going even more broad. And this is where I think the limitations are actually very important to the conversation.
You're going to say you wrote telekinesis. You wrote telekinesis / flying.
Yeah.
When you wrote this down,
because I really want to fly.
That's cheating. That's 2 powers in 1.
Well, is it though? Because I kind of believe that telekinesis is, I feel like all of these different superpowers, they're all like part of these branches that all kind of go back up the stream to one thing. And I think that top power is telekinesis.
I mean, multiple comic book heroes fly by telekinesis.
Yeah.
That is the official explanation. It's actually how Anne McCaffrey's Dragons fly in Dragon Riders of Pern, which is an underread series these days. One of the classics of my childhood, one of the best-selling series. You should all read it. The dragons move by telekinesis. The dragons cannot fly with their wingspan, but she's like, they use telekinesis.
Because it does feel like an easy justification, but what if telekinesis only works as a relative thing, where your body has to be stationary for anything else to work? If you jump on a platform and try to like push it upwards, it's not going to go anywhere because you have to be stable.
And that is often the limitation to telekinesis that I read, which is why I kind of thought you might be cheating. But you're not really in superhero terms because multiple superheroes do this.
Because I also think that, like, I don't know, way back in college, I was coming up with like a whole sort of like magic system around that concept of telekinesis is everything, and that like basically the better you get at telekinesis, the more abilities open up to you, like regeneration.
Yeah.
What if you get to the point where you can literally telekinetically move trillions of cells within your body to be able to perfectly go in the correct sort of orientation to heal yourself? But now we're talking about like, okay, do you have the brain power and ability to process trillions of individual actions? It's like, it's a very broad thing. So I kind of just wanted to leave it as the telekinesis as seen in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda, where it's just like, I'm going to move that thing and I'm going to move over there. And I feel like it's there's a lot of practicality to that type of
it would get
ability.
a high score for having it in my life. Even you've probably done this. We do it all the time. Like I'll point at my cup and I'll sing the Force theme. See if my children will bring me the cup of water. They usually will if you sing the Force theme. They usually will do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Meanwhile, my wife is just gonna look at me and be like, "Really?" And then walk into a different room. I'm like, "Well, it was worth a shot."
Best flying in comics? Thor.
Right, because he throws the hammer and just hangs on.
Onto it. It's so cool. It is so dumb. It's the dumbest, coolest thing. And maybe there's dumber things in comics. Let's be honest. Arm fall off man. Maybe.
Arm fall off man?
Arm fall off man. He can take off his limb and throw it at people. That's his superpower.
Then can he does it crawl back to him?
Yeah, I think he can reattach it.
Okay.
So arm fall off man. He was introduced
A+ name
as a joke in the comics. It's not like they were trying to make a real serious comic about arm fall off man. I believe it was one of those scenes like in Mystery Men where they're having all the people come. And you know, in an early comic, they're like, we're recruiting new heroes, or here are the heroes that just don't quite make it. Arm fall off man. I believe that was, but he is a real hero, either Marvel or DC. So, all right, my number one, and I based this kind of on how fun is it to write about. How fun would it be to have, and how fun have people done things with it? And I picked portals.
All right.
The main reason being that it's a 5 out of 5 because it's like you teleporting around the world, going anywhere you want, and it's a visually cool way to do that.
So when you say portals, are you talking like an actual portal that's stuck in space that you have to create?
So
are you talking like portal gun, like from the game Portal, or like Doctor Strange?
I'm talking Doctor Strange, Wheel of Time portals.
Okay.
Wheel of Time does the same thing Doctor Strange did. I got to write about those in the Wheel of Time. I don't know if you've read that, but they have Doctor Strange style portals.
Gotcha.
In later Wheel of Time. And I had spent years as a child reading these books and as a youth and things like that, thinking there are so many things you could do with that. So many things. Come on, Robert Jordan. When will you do all the cool things you could do with portals? And then I got to take over the series, and I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? And I made a character who was just an expert in portals. He couldn't do anything else, but he was really good at those. And I got to do all the cool stuff I wanted to do with portals. But when did the video game Portal come out?
2010?
Like, I want to say it was right around the same time that I was doing this. Because Portal obviously does really cool things with it. You guys have done Portal.
One of my favorite videos I've made is Portal Trick Shots.
Yeah, which is a fantastic video. When 2007, so the
earlier
same year that I was working on Wheel of Time.
Dang.
And so
that's some coincidence right there.
Yeah,
and
like I got to write, open up a little portal to the bottom of the ocean where the pressure differential is going to cause it to basically make a gun for you, a laser gun of water. Open up a portal to the middle of the mantle of the earth and get some lava going here.
Oh boy!
All
I must admit, I have not read Wheel of Time. I've been too intimidated to start. Yeah. But it's been on my list. I want to start it at some point because I know you finished the series, and I'm like, okay, I want to get through this whole thing.
It was actually a pressure valve for me. I went to Team Jordan. I said, I'm gonna need, because I'm me, one goofy aspect of the magic to just go hog wild with. Everything else I'm gonna try to keep to the exact way that he wrote it. I'm not gonna come up with a lot of new powers. We're in the end of the books. I don't want to be in developing new powers. I want to take what we have and just kind of do it. But one character needs to basically be, if you took Brandon and you gave him one of these powers and dropped in the world, all the goofy things he would come up with. And I picked this character who is a side character that had been named but didn't really have a character personality. You have a lot of those in books. And I'm like, I'm going to take him, I'm going to make this his thing. And he was kind of my pressure valve so that the rest of the magic didn't have to feel too much like the way I do magic. And this one guy that can make portals, he does all kinds of stuff.
Can you change the size of the portals?
Yeah.
So he can make them really, really tiny? Because
really,
like
big.
water jet cutting is one of the most insane things if you've ever seen, like the ability to cut anything. And if you have like a portal at the bottom of the ocean, that's a huge amount of pressure.
Yep. Everything from water to being like, hey, you need more tea? I'm opening up a portal to the teapot. Here, we'll refill your cup.
Just like inside the bottom of the teapot.
So stuff like that. So I gave portals. It's I'd love to have it. It's fun to write about, and people have done interesting things with it.
I fully agree, but I also feel like portals can get very complicated very quickly when you start talking about like momentum and like frames of reference. Like what happens when you shoot a portal? Again, I'm thinking about like portal gun type stuff onto the side of a semi truck driving down the highway. And do you jump out with the momentum of the truck? Do you just jump out without any of that momentum?
Oh, there's so many like
how does the wind interact?
Portals break causality. That's the
Good point.
Once you break causality, once you have FTL and things like that, then everything's out the window. And stuff like that. But if you just ignore that, then you have all these things. I mean, portals are perpetual motion machines. So the question is, what opens the portal and keeps it going? They're a can of worms. I actually have some rules in the Cosmere of things we won't do and some things we do very sparingly. Portals are one of the sparing things. We can do them, but you have to be very careful with how you do teleportation. We don't do time travel.
I don't know. Is that how Dalinar does it?
Yeah, that's how Dalinar does it. We don't do time travel, and we don't do. There's another big one. I'm trying to remember what it was, but
sparingly is coming back to life.
Oh, sparingly. So you can do resurrections. I mean, the very first Cosmere book starts with someone being resurrected, but you have to have like what is dead and mostly dead, and stick to dead and mostly dead. So that's a sparingly one. There's another one that mind control is a very sparingly. Anytime you're breaking people's free will, that's dangerous.
It's also very immoral, and I specifically tried to avoid those types of powers because I don't like. Of course, I can come up with all of these dark thoughts about how I could use mind control, but like I don't know, I don't really have any interest in thinking about that.
When you said telekinesis when we were doing this, I thought you said telepathy.
Oh.
And I was going to reference the great Isaac Asimov story about the robot that can read people's minds from iRobot, highly recommended. But telepathy seems like a terrible, like reading people's minds seems like a terrible power. You just don't want to know what's in there, and you don't want to invade people's privacy. And
another one being like invisibility. I can see why people would want to have it, but like I don't like.
What would you do with it?
Cool. I can now like sit in a room by myself, or like and pretend I'm by myself.
I know there's a lot of really introverted people who would love that, but
I'm not that introverted, so it doesn't really interest me that much.
It doesn't interest me either. So, but anyway, the other thing we don't do in the Cosmere is alternate dimensions. Because if you have alternate dimensions or have time travel, both of those can too easily be used to undermine character growth or important moments and things like that. So.
You're already kind of teetering on the edge with characters dying or actually dying.
Dying or actually dying, and that's the one that like a lot. I think I like playing with that because a lot of my favorite fantasy stories, Gandalf's resurrection is more interesting than if Gandalf had died, right? And a lot of the great fantasy stories have this like second chances life as a major theme. In the stories, and I think it is usually worth the cost. You got to be real careful with it, though.
Slippery slope.
And you got to make sure that like fans understand who could come back and who can't, because when you've given they can't, you don't want to break that. And so I try to be pretty clear with that. But once again, I have two major magic systems, both Elantris and Warbreaker, which are built around fundamentally the concept of resurrection. So
But again, with several asterisks attached to it.
All right, what's your number one?
So my number one is very similar to yours, but I'm going from a more raw standpoint of just pure teleportation. Because years ago I saw a movie that I fell in love with, despite it not being that great of a movie.
It Jumper?
It was Jumper.
Did you read the book?
I didn't read the book.
The book's real good.
I bet.
Yeah.
And I just, it was one of those, at least the movie at least, it was one of those that I took away way more than I enjoyed in the moment, and I started thinking about all the things.
You will like the book.
Okay, you know what? I am going to pick that book up.
Yeah.
It's
a YA novel. It's anyway.
Okay.
So don't go in expecting epic fantasy or stuff.
Sure.
But I read it. I'm like, I don't have to do that now. I don't because someone has done it well.
It's been done. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I cut you off.
Oh yeah, no worries. I just there's a lot of possibilities that you can do. Like you can essentially do flying with teleporting if you want to have that sensation. But again, it's like, okay, where are the limitations to this? What are the consequences of this? When you teleport, do you carry with you your momentum? Like conservation of momentum, does that apply to teleporting? So it's like, yeah, sure, you can fly up into the sky and then like you fall, and then if you teleport, are you just gonna you teleport into a room and then fly 120 miles an hour into the wall? Like when you teleport, I've never really seen anyone do teleporting with rotation as an aspect as well. It's always just position to a different point in time, usually with like the Earth being like the actual rotating point. It's always just like, gravity's always down.
Yeah, gravity's always down.
If you teleport to Australia right now, you're gonna land on your head.
Yeah, if you you ever seen people have done comics about it and talk about it? I've got time travel. You travel back in time, so you end up in the vacuum of space because you go to the same point that you would be in.
The planet has gone this way.
The planet's gone, and the
solar
sun
system's
is,
all the way over there.
Yeah, that is one of the dangers. Teleportation, it would be really fun. I mean, watching the opening of X2, which is one of the great
It's one of the
openings to
most
a movie.
incredible opening action sequences of any movie.
Yeah, and just saying this is what you can do with just short-term or short-distance teleportation, and the visuals on it and the BAMFs and how they work just was really, really well done, and that's the selling point. Jumper is another great one, the idea of just people who can teleport and what it would do to us and the world, and things like that there are people who can legit just get anywhere, do anything.
I love that concept. I remember because going to college, I was always away from family and growing up living. I lived overseas growing up, and I would always want, man, I wish I could just like snap my fingers and go hang out with my friends on the other side of the world. And yeah, teleportation was always one of probably that and flying. Honestly, flying is very high up there for me, but I always kind of just tuck that under.
Teleportation is just a better flying. Flying is more fun, but teleportation just gets you there faster.
But another one of those things I thought about as like an asterisk to teleportation is like, what about the matter that you are now taking the place of? And I always just thought of like, they swap. And so like if you, because the next X2, it's like, he's like, oh, I don't want to teleport and end up inside of a wall. I would die. And it's like, well, no, I just think that I can teleport inside of a boulder and then have a perfect granite statue of me appear where I was a moment ago.
If you do that power gets way more interesting because you can do all kinds of cool things with that.
Because I was like, then I can like excavate an entire tunnel by just slowly teleporting forward, back and forth.
Yep. You'd have your Fortress of Solitude underground you've made that only you can get into.
Meanwhile, there's like a trillion
statues of me. That's really cool, you know? Teleportation, when I was on book tour, I'm just like, man, can someone invent teleportation so that I don't have to get on a plane?
Oh boy,
fly to this thing,
I feel you there.
Sign, go to another one, and do that 30 times in a row. If I could just go home in between and then every night go to a different signing, that would be so nice.
I don't know how people who travel all the time do it, because I've traveled more in the last month than I have in the last like couple years. I've been all over the country in the last month, and I am very exhausted from it. I was like, I just want to be home now.
Well, those are our superpowers that we would like to have, read about, or write about. Wren, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Honestly, this has been a huge pleasure, a huge honor. Thank you so much for having me.
And we will see you guys some other time. Go check out Quarter's stuff.
Thanks for watching.